The expensive vendor sat at the top of the assessment queue. The identity broker sat on a cheap line item. A compromise of the broker would travel through every application that already trusted that login. The invoice never measured that travel. The cheap broker outranked the expensive vendor. That sentence names one failure. We ranked the invoice, and the blast followed the login. Spend tier is the rank we give a supplier because of what we pay. A high-spend vendor gets the deep questionnaire, the on-site review, and the longest folder. A low-spend vendor gets the short form and a calendar reminder. Blast radius is how far a compromise of that supplier still travels after the first system fails. Those two objects are not the same measurement. A queue sorted by spend can still put the largest path on the shortest form. Third-party risk management has to rank suppliers by how an attack through that supplier would scale across the environment, not by contractual criticality and not by spend tier. TPRM that files the deep review against the largest invoice will miss the cheap broker that already sits in front of many applications. A purchase order ranks commercial weight. It does not rank how many applications already accept one login. We have to count the applications that inherit that identity, not the dollars on the purchase order. A count of those applications is the rank that spend cannot give us. Spend measures commercial criticality. It tells procurement who can stop a project if the written contract is late. It tells finance which supplier will hurt the budget if the price moves. It tells the business which logo is hard to replace next quarter. Those are real facts, and they belong on a commercial ledger. They are not facts about how far a compromise travels once a login is abused. Spend misses the number of applications that already accept a federated login. Spend misses whether the supplier is operationally isolated or whether it sits in the path of many downstream systems. Spend misses whether a cut of that supplier is a cut of one book, or a cut of every application that trusted the same identity. Those are path facts. Path facts do not appear on an invoice. If the path is not on the invoice, the queue that reads the invoice will not see it. A high-spend vendor can still be isolated. A specialist that receives a weekly extract through a controlled channel and never holds identities, code, or production infrastructure has a contained reach. The invoice can be large because the work is expensive. The blast can still stop at that extract. Isolation is a path fact. The purchase order does not record it. A low-cost identity federation provider can sit on a cheap line item and still serve many downstream applications. Each of those applications already accepts the broker's login as if it were ours. A compromise of that broker is not one application. It is every application that already trusted that identity. The cheap line item is still one identity sitting in front of that set. The broker is cheap because many applications reuse one integration. We pay once. Every new application that accepts the same login adds almost nothing to the invoice and a great deal to the blast. That is why spend and reach can move in opposite directions on this supplier. Identity federation is a single login that many applications will accept. The broker issues or asserts the identity. The applications do not each keep their own store of that person. They trust the broker, and they treat a valid assertion as a reason to open a session. That trust is efficient, because we do not enroll the same person 20 times. That trust is also one object sitting in front of many systems. A failure at the broker is already a failure at every system that accepted the assertion. That is why a cheap broker can outrank a tall invoice without a change in spend. Downstream applications are the systems that inherit the broker's assertion. A ticketing tool, a finance console, a document store, and a vendor portal can all accept the same federated login. We do not need those applications to share a supplier name. We need them to share a trusted identity. When they do, the broker's failure is already their failure. We do not need a new invoice for that inheritance. We need a current count of the applications on that login. The count has to be current, because a new application can join the same login without a new purchase order. Procurement sorts the queue by annual spend. The broker is a line item. The isolated vendor is a large purchase order. The deep assessment follows the purchase order. The short form follows the line item. The blast does not read that sort. The queue looks disciplined, while the largest path sits on the cheapest row. Discipline of that kind is a filing habit. It is not a ranking of reach. Blast radius is how far a compromise still travels after the first system fails. For an isolated vendor, the travel can stop at one extract or one environment, because nothing else accepted that supplier as an identity. For an identity broker, the travel follows every application that already accepted that login. because those applications were built to trust the assertion. Ranking by spend hides that difference. Ranking by path makes it visible. Spend and blast radius can disagree on the same supplier, and the queue has to take the larger of those two facts. The spend bar stays where procurement drew it. The expensive vendor is tall. The broker is short. After that drawing, downstream applications appear around the broker. Each application accepts the same federated login. The invoice does not grow. The reach does grow. Ranking by blast radius means we ask how an attack through that supplier would scale. We count how many applications accept this identity. We count how many environments share this broker. We ask whether a cut of this vendor is a cut of one book or a cut of many systems. Those questions set assessment depth, monitoring intensity, and how ready we are to revoke. The invoice does not set that depth. Reach is the count, and the count is what the queue should have sorted. Assessment depth is how much proof we demand before we accept the supplier, and how often we ask again. Depth should follow the path a compromise would take. A tall invoice is not a path. A federated login that many applications already accept is a path. That is the rank the queue should have used. Evidence depth has to follow reach, not supplier size. A cheap broker with production identity still warrants entitlement exports, session logs, and a revocation drill, because a compromise would already have a path through many applications. A high-spend specialist with a narrow read-only channel may not produce the same artifacts, and should not be forced into the same binder. Demanding the same binder creates friction without a matching reduction in blast. For the isolated vendor, clauses in the written contract, data handling attestations, and a periodic review can be enough. A translation service that receives isolated document batches through a controlled channel is the same shape. Data flow only, no identities, no code, no infrastructure. The reach is a batch. The evidence can match a batch. For the identity broker, the artifact is today's list of applications that accept the federated login. The artifact is how access is granted, scoped, watched, and revoked. The artifact is whether we can deactivate that identity without waiting for the broker's own console. A sentence that says access is controlled is not that list. Age belongs on the list because a new application can join the same login after the last review. The written contract should require notice when a new downstream application starts accepting the broker's identity. A price change is not the only event that restarts the assessment. A new application on the same login is a new blast radius, even when the monthly fee does not move. Notice is the event that re-ranks the supplier. If the written contract is silent on new applications, the blast can grow without a file being opened. Rank the path, not the purchase order. Count the applications that already inherit one identity. Put the deep review on the broker whose compromise would travel through those applications. Put the lighter review on the expensive vendor whose reach still stops at one isolated channel. Spend sorted the queue because the invoice was easy to sort. Reach should have sorted it, because reach is the travel. File the deep work where the login already travels. File the lighter work where the extract still stops. Thank you.